Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the homestead. My name is Heather, and it has been an extremely prolific tomato season. I had been picking tomatoes when they were a little bit orange and letting them ripen inside, and my counter is overloaded, and I have tomatoes left to pick still. So at this point, it's a little bit easier to leave the tomatoes on the plant until they fully ripen because I'm running out of space inside. What I've been doing is quartering the tomatoes and putting them in the freezer until I have 7 gallon-sized bags worth of tomatoes in order to make tomato sauce. I've also been roasting fresh tomatoes in order to make roasted tomato salsa. But classically, the tomatoes are coming in much faster than I can deal with them. So for now, I'm just kind of leaving them on the plant until they are fully ripe. We are seeing some disease expanding a little more in the greenhouse. I have placed copper on the leaves to try and slow down the progression of disease. But ultimately, it's going to be disease that befalls these plants. It's just kind of what happens in this humid, hot area that we're in. With the amount of tomatoes that we've already canned, the amount of tomatoes that we have in the freezer, and the amount of tomatoes that we have on the plant, everything could die tomorrow and we will have had our canning goals and preservation goals met. These are determinate varieties of tomatoes, which means that each plant makes kind of a set amount of fruit. So when I planted over 30 tomato plants in this greenhouse, I didn't expect them to yield as many tomatoes each plant as they have. It's been crazy. So having said all that, I'm starting to get into the phase of tomatoes where I'm starting to give them away. So today I've got my neighbor in mind, but I happen to know that she really loves tomatoes and she really loves peppers, and I have a lot of both. I did get asked recently about when is the best time to fertilize your tomato plants, and I will say that does kind of depend. Laying down a few inches of good quality compost is really gonna probably carry the plant through the entire season. But in case you are noticing yellowing of the leaves, or maybe not as many blossoms as you'd expect, that may be an indicator that you may want to or need to fertilize. So in general, in the beginning stages of growth, the plant should be focusing on leaf development and root development. So when you put your transplants in the ground, before they have any flowers, you can lay down something like rabbit manure, put the rabbit manure in the hole, fish emulsion, something like that. Something that is more nitrogen heavy as far as the NPK ratio. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Nitrogen is what's going to help the plant with its leaf production, and having nice big healthy leaves is really important for collecting energy from the sun and growing the rest of the plant. Phosphorus in general is for flower and fruit development, and potassium is related to the roots. All of these nutrients are really important, but they each carry different weights of importance at different stages of the plant's life. So initially, you could go a little bit nitrogen heavy, but when the plants start putting on flowers, you can start amping up the phosphorus. So once my tomatoes started putting on blooms, I added just one of these Job's fertilizer spikes. The directions on this fertilizer said to put the spikes in the ground near the plant when the plant started putting on blooms. So that's what I did. Side note, we live really close to a military installation. They've been on summer vacation, so it's been really quiet. However, don't be shocked if you hear the occasional machine gun in the background, because it's just kind of part of life here. Things are looking really congested on this side of the greenhouse. That's because this volunteer Kajaris melon has really taken over. Ooh, that was a dragonfly. We've got lots of really nice sized Kajaris in here. Bunches of bees, loving it. And when the Kajaris ripen, these dark green stripes here will turn orange. And that's really convenient because sometimes some melons, it's hard to tell when they're ripe. It's really not hard to tell with a Kajari. Speaking of color change, I'm noticing something with our green peppers. This is either a California Wonder or an Emerald Giant green pepper. And you can see it's starting to get this coloration happening. Most peppers, even though green for most of the time that they're on the plant, will ripen to a reddish or orangish color as they hang out on the plant. Peppers can also turn colors because of stress. So this little guy has unfortunately experienced some bug damage. Turning red can be a sign that things are just progressing normally because of the age of the plant. Turning red can also mean stress. We do grow a lot of green peppers, especially this year. I have grown more green peppers than I ever have in years past. We really love them for fresh eating, but my favorite way to preserve them is actually just to chop them up, put them straight into a Ziploc bag and straight into the freezer. They're really easy to pull out and add to anything that could benefit from pepper flavor, like casseroles, soups, pastas, omelets, pizzas. It's kind of endless. This big old basket of produce should make our neighbor really happy. There's definitely a disease presence in the tomato tunnel and the raised bed garden as well. The Belgian giants are really doing well despite that, but it might not be super long before these plants really start to suffer. We're getting some rain in the next couple days, which we still really desperately need. Any kind of wetness on the tops of leaves really does help disease spread, and I don't think I can really afford to take many more leaves off of these plants in order to try to prevent the spread. So I've done the copper spray out here as well, but we'll just have to see how long they last. Thankfully, the melons that are underneath and behind this trellis are very eager to take over. We got some more Kajaris over here, as well as a cute little melon called the Charante Melon. This melon is a lot like a cantaloupe, but so much more floral. And remember how I said it's sometimes kind of hard to tell when melons are ripe? This particular variety, you can actually tell by the smell. So this end here is the blossom end. You can see the scar where the blossom was. And once it starts to smell really fragrant, that's when this melon is ready. It smells kind of like a cucumber right now, which means it's not ripe yet. See the funny shape of this melon? It should be nice and round like all the others, but it kind of looks like a banana. A lot of times some of the earlier fruits, especially cucumbers and melons, can look like that, and that's just a result of the flower really not being ideally pollinated. Sometimes that can happen before the plants get really big and put on lots of flowers and really attract the pollinators. It's really nothing to worry about if it's just a few of the melons or cucumbers doing that, because likely in no time flat they'll be putting on all kinds of flowers to attract the pollinators. I told you, this little guy was a flower just last week, and I knew that by this time this week it would be ready to harvest. This cucumber is called Miniature White. I got the seed from Baker Creek, and this is as big as they get. They're really sweet, really juicy, and they're a favorite of mine. One of the things I really like about them is that they don't go really crazy with their vines. They do vine out about 3 to 4 feet, but they stay pretty well contained in the bed. So I haven't found a need to trellis this variety of cucumber because they don't get very high up on the trellis anyway, so I'd rather save the trellis for something a little bit more wild. I do have another variety of cucumber in here called pickle bush, and it's very much the same way in the growth habit that it has. And see, that's what they look like. This little white cucumber isn't going to get bigger than this, but the pickle bush, it could get bigger. I find that they're better when they're smaller. The seeds stay a little bit smaller that way, and I just like the texture better. Cucumbers come on really hard and really fast, so I'm gonna have to watch those plants. I mean, just look at the mess of flowers. It's a little bit ridiculous. The cucamelons have put on a second flush of flowers. That's fun. Look at how crazy this has gotten. The onions that were in this bed, I've been harvesting them as I need them for cooking. They haven't been as big as they could have because they did flower this year, and that can happen if things just heat up too fast in the summer. I put the onions in the ground while we were still getting frosts in the late winter, early spring, but then we got super hot, super fast, and it triggered them to bolt. It's not always a bad thing. You just don't get big onions out of it when that happens, and you also don't get an onion that stores well. So the onion flower stalk here actually penetrates the center of the bulb, and that will just make it go bad faster. This isn't necessarily a horrible thing for us because I prefer to dice and freeze my onions just like I dice and freeze my peppers. I have harvested a couple shallots. Isn't that pretty? And then this is our elephant garlic from last week. So last week we didn't wash off the dirt from the garlic bulbs because I didn't want to really add any moisture to the plant. But once the dirt is pretty well dry, it's pretty easy to brush the dirt to the side and have a nice clean looking bulb. She's in there. Sorry, Mommy. I'm sorry. I feel bad for disturbing her, but she hasn't been in there all the other times that I have gone to check on the eggs. Nothing has really changed with our bean situation here, so I'm gonna walk away from that area and give her some space. Over behind me, this is our kids' garden, and it's gotten a little bit overgrown with weeds. It's really not their fault. I should have laid down some woven weed cover to really help the kids out. However, they've been coming in here and managing what they can, and they have grown a pretty sizable watermelon. What they think they planted is a cross between a golden watermelon and a sugar baby. Golden watermelons have this golden color, and they also have golden leaves. Now, the leaves on this plant did start out green, so this could also mean disease, but the color of this melon is having me think that it is still a cross. However, as far as I know, most watermelons show their ripeness in the same way. So we have the watermelon. There's a stem here that connects the watermelon to the vine, and right across the street from the watermelon on the vine is this curlicue tendril here. And this tendril, as the watermelon matures, will actually start to dry up and die back. We can see that happening here. And once this tendril has actually dried up all the way to the stem, that means the melon that's across the vine from it is actually ripe. It's a really cool trick to be able to tell when your watermelon is ready. There's honestly nothing sadder than thinking that you are going to pick a nice ripe watermelon, cutting it open, and basically getting a cucumber out of it. I found another couple volunteer tomatoes in the garden here, and I'm pretty sure that this one is going to be a currant tomato or a spoon tomato. Those tomatoes that we grew in here last year were so prolific. They're super tiny, about the size of a pea, but they pack an immense amount of flavor. And while I was harvesting the elephant garlic, I noticed this one, which looks to be some kind of cherry tomato. It may also be a spoon variety, though I think this truss is a little bit big for that. See how small this is compared to my hand? The flowers are small. The little truss, which is the branches that hold the flower, those are small. But these trusses are much wider spaced, likely because they're going to host a larger fruit. Back to the onion bed where I had another tomato plant volunteer come up. This one has actually started to put on little bitty fruits. When I first noticed this volunteer come up, I told you guys that I thought this was a tomato called a blueberry cream tomato. They have purple shoulders and yellow or cream colored bodies of the rest of the fruit. I think I was right. The purpley tops on these tomatoes will become more pronounced as they mature and get to see some more sun. They've been relatively shaded by the onions that were in here and kind of falling over on them, but I'm just gonna let this plant go, let it ramble, and get some bonus fruit out of it. I really do enjoy volunteer plants, and I let them grow if they're not going to impede on what I've already got planned. All these ground cherries, these were all volunteers as well. No ripe ground cherries yet, but they are producing. I mean, for all I know, there have been ripe ground cherries, but those happen to be a favorite of my kids, so they might be getting to them before I can. I'm going to be making a video about how we process our peppers in more ways than just freezing. And when that video is ready, it's going to be right up here. In the meantime, if you don't see anything right there and you want to watch another video, go ahead and click this one.